It started with a sound no one expected to hear that night in Paris. The echo of a South African command shouted through the corridors of a luxury hotel thousands of kilometers from home. Guests thought it was a film shoot. But it wasn't. It was the biggest police raid South Africa had ever conducted beyond its borders, and at the center of it all, the name that once ruled the Ministry of Police itself, Nathi Mthethwa. Inside that elegant hotel room, the truth unfolded in flashes, suitcases lined with euros, coded notes, and a passport that didn't bear his name. Sources later said the operation was quietly greenlit by someone within SAPS' own senior circle, and that's where the scandal began to twist into something much darker. You're about to see how a man once responsible for shaping South Africa's law enforcement system became the target of its most secretive international raid. And why one top police officer, a man known for loyalty, might have played both sides of this explosive story. So here's a challenge before we go further. Think about this. When corruption is exported across borders, who controls the narrative? The media, the government, or those quietly pulling the strings from hotel suites in foreign cities? Paris isn't new to political secrets. But the story that unfolded inside the Four Seasons George V that night wasn't about romance or diplomacy. It was about money, a sum so large that even the officers tasked with cataloging it reportedly stopped counting midway. One officer later described the scene as an entire budget hidden in luggage. For years, whispers about Nathi Mthethwa's offshore connections had floated through Pretoria's corridors, dismissed as rumor, brushed off by press statements, buried under new scandals. But that night in Paris, something concrete surfaced. The operation was led by a special task group, one said to include both Interpol liaisons and South African detectives flown in under civilian cover. That's not standard procedure. That's desperation. Mthethwa, once hailed as a political strategist and loyal ANC guardian, had built his image on discipline and authority. He had weathered public criticism, survived reshuffles, and maintained quiet influence even after leaving the cabinet. Yet this raid tore straight through the image, leaving behind a chaos of unanswered questions. Why Paris? And who tipped off the authorities? Early leaks from inside the operation said the trigger wasn't European intelligence. It came from within South Africa. A senior officer reportedly contacted a counterpart in France 2 weeks before the raid. The message: he's booked, he's packing, he's not coming back. That one sentence set the clock ticking. By the time Mthethwa checked into his suite, surveillance was already in place. The hotel's marble hallways became a theater of conflicting interests. French investigators wanted to seize, SAPS wanted to silence, and the politicians back home wanted one thing: control. Within the first hour of the raid, 3 calls were made directly to Pretoria. One was traced to a number linked to an ex-security advisor in the presidency. That detail alone shifted the entire story from scandal to potential cover-up. Witnesses said Mthethwa was calm when officers entered, almost too calm. He didn't resist. He simply asked, "Who sent you?" And when he got no answer, he laughed. That laugh would later become the center of speculation. Was it defiance, or was it the confidence of a man who knew this operation would never see daylight in South Africa's mainstream media? What investigators found next deep in the mystery: 2 identical briefcases with identical contents, but one key difference. The second held documents stamped with official seals. They were draft agreements linked to procurement projects, some dating back to his tenure as minister. Projects tied to European firms that had mysteriously won tenders back home. Those tenders, according to Treasury data, were worth more than our $2.4 billion. The link was undeniable. And here's where it turns from corruption to conspiracy. Among the officers in that Paris operation was a man whose name you'll soon recognize, a high-ranking SAPS commander still active in service today. He wasn't there to arrest. He was there to retrieve something. That detail, confirmed by 2 separate sources, changes the entire lens of this story. Because if a serving top cop was inside that room, not to seize evidence, but to protect it, what exactly was South Africa's police doing in Paris? Was it justice, or a quiet mission to erase a trail that had grown too visible? Hours after the Paris raid, diplomatic channels lit up. South Africa's embassy received an urgent coded message: containment required. It wasn't about safety or legal representation. It was about silence. The French authorities had requested cooperation, but back in Pretoria, the response was cautious, fragmented, and delayed. Someone was buying time. And in the world of political scandal, time is the most valuable currency. Meanwhile, local media in South Africa remained unusually quiet. Not one major outlet ran the story in the first 48 hours. Insiders say certain editors received soft calls from individuals linked to the Ministry of State Security. Those calls reportedly contained one simple instruction: hold the story until further notice. But when you bury truth that deep, it eventually starts to rot and surface on its own. By the third day, fragments began leaking online. Grainy images, snippets of conversation, screenshots of hotel invoices. Someone inside the investigation had decided that if justice couldn't be transparent, exposure would do the job instead. And that's how the raid transformed from a classified event into a national scandal waiting to erupt. For the first time, the public could connect the dots that officials were desperately trying to blur. Behind the scenes, the tension between SAPS and Interpol reached breaking point. French investigators wanted to press charges immediately, but the South African delegation insisted on internal review. That phrase, as one officer described, usually means bury the evidence, rewrite the story. And when one of the Interpol officers leaked an internal memo showing discrepancies in the seized document list, the damage was irreversible. The operation had split into two factions, those who wanted truth and those who feared it. And then came the revelation that shocked even the insiders. One of the seized phones contained direct messages between Mthethwa and a serving police general, coded in mundane business language. The phrase, "deliver the flowers," appeared multiple times. But when the metadata was decrypted, it wasn't about flowers. It was about funds. Transfers. Large ones. Through accounts in Dubai, Zurich, and yes, Johannesburg. That's not coincidence. That's architecture. As details spread, a retired intelligence analyst came forward anonymously, revealing that this operation wasn't new. It was phase 2 of a covert audit project started years earlier, known internally as Project Luminaire. The goal? To trace financial irregularities involving state-linked enterprises and their European partners. Mthethwa's Paris connection, according to the source, was the missing piece, the final node that connected the money flow back to domestic power players still in office. But there was another problem: evidence custody. The documents seized in Paris were supposed to be flown directly to a secure archive in Pretoria. They never arrived. The official chain of custody record ends at Charles de Gaulle Airport. From there, it's blank. No handover. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Someone erased the trail before it even reached home soil. Halfway through the scandal, a chilling question began to circulate. Was this entire raid, the hotel drama, the public embarrassment, the political fallout, just a distraction from something bigger? Because if a top cop was inside that room not to expose corruption but to redirect attention, what was happening elsewhere that night in South Africa's corridors of power? Some say the raid was smoke. Others say it was fire disguised as fog.